Okay, so hello everyone. I just wanted to give sort of a brief overview of the Jenkins instance that we do use for most of our engineering work. There are sort of a handful of other Jenkins instances that do some specialized tasks for package source and our sort of core image building that I won't be covering here. It'll probably work best if you people ask questions, but otherwise I'll just sort of be giving sort of a 10,000-foot overview because I know when something goes wrong, it's often Jenkins that delivers the bad news and thus is attractive to be the one to get shot. So if that screen sharing is successful, so this is our lovely Jenkins instance at jenkins.joyent.us. Sort of the default view is like this giant list of jobs. And I guess the sort of the two sort of main, or I guess three sort of things happening. Once, we build the platform. So there are some lovely, jobs that, build the whole OS. There are jobs that build specific components, such as Pappy and all those others. And nightly, if we go back to the top, oops, is also sort of set up as a chain of jobs. So every night or morning, I forget how it works out with the time zones. We reflash a system in the Emmy lab with the latest bits from master, and then sort of run through this series of tests. And that's sort of our, I'm not sure I want to say first line of defense, or at least last line of defense for bugs. And sort of like for the release process, for example, the sort of last step is to run it through the whole gauntlet of nightly tests. And those currently take less than a day, which is good, but they're very long, and it takes a long time to get that feedback. So sort of an active area of improvement would be tightening those down. I think there's also I don't know, an attempt at a more compressed view. These are views in Jenkins speak, so you can sort of filter these based on regular expressions of job names or a bunch of other bits of metadata. So I presume this one here is called head node is going to tell us things that make up the USB head node. Okay. This overview one here is an attempt at trying to like condense things down to a dashboard, if that's more useful to you. But so the most notable thing we're not doing yet is we're not really using Jenkins for its sort of normal CI, like running of tests. Not all repositories are represented in Jenkins. Not all repositories have unit tests, and among those who do, there's not sort of like a consistent way of sort of hooking them up. So it looks like there are many jobs in Jenkins as there are, but there are actually far fewer, I think, than there ideally would be. Under the Joyent Engineering Docs, or Mo, I guess take your pick at the name, there's a kind of a long like historical view of the Jenkins setup and how it works. And almost everything there is to know is probably linked from here at some point. There are diagrams and links to charts, instructions on how to, for people managing Jenkins, which anyone is welcome to volunteer and help out with, how they work, where things are deployed, etc., ACLs, and all that good stuff. So this, I don't know, is a longish document, but the answer is probably here, and I can, recommendations for how to restructure it so it is more useful for people who are using Jenkins as opposed to sort of administrating it would be certainly welcome. If you last looked at Jenkins, sort of the upstream, like a decade ago, because I guess it's been around for a while, the documentation has improved somewhat. It's a little bit less random wikis and a little bit more structured documentation with tables of contents and like consistent formatting. So if you need to know how to do something for some reason or looking up a really popular plugin, that might help. So we monitor, so Jenkins exposes a bunch of metrics. Um, so this is the giant JSON blob of stuff you can get with things like how many nodes are online and how much memory is being used, etc. So we use that to make a little like Grafana dashboard, so which says sort of like, hey, it's up, and how long it's been up, and things like that. This is good that it is possible, but isn't something we've had to look at too often. The other thing metrics are used for is alerts. So in Circonus, there are so under the engineering account or subgroup, or whatever they're called in Circonus speak, there is the Jenkins instance. And we were looking at a few different checks related to it, such as, is it up? Is the cert still working? Are the nodes, are a reasonable number of nodes up and connected to it? And that's sort of what we hear when these checks fail. Emails get sent to myself, and I think Trent and Josh and a few other people to, eventually, faster than get it fixed. It's not something that's so critical that it like wakes anyone up at this point in time. There are, under the tools project, there's a Jenkins component, and so that sort of has the list of things that are either being worked on or aspirationally we would eventually work on in the future. I know I sent an email out a week or two ago about a Jenkins change to how legacy tokens are handled, and so there's sort of a bunch of follow-up tickets or a grouping of tickets related to that to clean that up further, so that how we're managing, so that the sort of like security of the system can slowly be improved. I guess a little bit back to the history. So, which again, you can read here. So there was some like old system, Bamboo, that was unsatisfactory, and so Mountain Gorilla, as much as it's loved now, was the thing that eats bamboo, and made things incrementally better there. Until about like a year or two ago, the Jenkins, so like agents were these manually managed loving pets with cute names based on the Wikipedia list of fictional butlers. Josh Wilson did a ton of work to make that something not manual, and that's where the sort of Jenkins agent, Jenkins agent repository that I know has sort of gotten expanded to be used a little bit more as like a base build image, and Joyent Retro came out of, both of which have been really useful. So there is now a little CLI tool called Jenkins ADM, which can do things like list agents and make new ones, delete them, reboot them, sort of things of that nature. So that's gotten a little bit better. In the, I guess, looking to the far future, sort of like the long-term vision would be that for every pending change to every repository, we run all of the tests before we integrate that change, and that's somewhere between indefinite and never finished. But that would be at least my vision of where I would eventually like to see this go. I think the somewhat more concrete, or maybe in the next year change, would be, right now all of our jobs are lovingly crafted through the GUI. So if you're making a job, you probably like clone some other random job that hopefully doesn't have terrible defaults, and then you click around and you click on configure. Then JavaScript stuff happens, and eventually there maybe is like this like shell script that doesn't really live in any repository and may or may not be the same as like other similar jobs. So there are sort of several competing ways to express most or all of the job configuration as code that can live in a repository or live in a repository and be reviewed like normal code. But I think that would be sort of like where to take this in the next sort of like, months to less than a year. Cool. There are jokes, yes, about bamboo. Yes, more subtle biology jokes about like bamboo to mountain gorilla could have been better. Maybe we should go back to the nautical theme and have like plankton and blue whales or something. Are there any other sort of like questions? Okay, I'm just glancing in chat as well. Okay, well, like I said, I hope to give a really just like 10,000-foot overview because I know it's sort of.
Chris, I guess one question I
sure,
have
go ahead.
is, what are ways we can? So it sounds like you're saying, if I understood correctly, that the way we have like this laid out right now, where we have all these commands copy and pasted and we're cloning the jobs, is less than ideal. What is the better way for us to be doing this?
So I guess there are several different sort of competing job configurations as code. And I'm not sure which of those is going to be the right one for us. So I'm not sure I have like a new best practice to suggest other than sort of like, it's generally better instead of having like this longish script here. And I think that we have ones that are longer to have like a script in the repository. I know one of the things that quickly trips people up with Mountain Gorilla is that it's like deeply intertwined with expectations about like which environmental variables will be here if I am being run as Jenkins, and then like assuming all sorts of things based on like job names and stuff like that. So I think the better best practice, or the incremental better practice from now, is to just have shorter jobs that call out to more scripts in your repository that you can test and run individually without being like a special environment. Once Tim's work comes into sort of lovingly kill Mountain Gorilla, I think that'll be like the right time to have a discussion about, okay, we made this one like good change. What's the next better one?
So Chris, does Jenkins support the concept of priorities? Because there are many times that we wanted to get a build more urgently and then it gets stuck behind many other jobs. So it might be a feature that we're just not using at the moment.
Sure. So the sort of best and sort of worst thing about Jenkins is all of the plugins. If you were sort of like starting from scratch and you were like a company that only did like Ruby gems on one version of Ubuntu, you could probably come up with something more tighter or focused. But since we do sort of all sorts of things and build our own OS and have all sorts of edge cases, we kind of end up with Jenkins or something that looks like Jenkins, where there's a million knobs. So I know there are directly to the question, I know there are plugins that can adjust the priority. I don't think we're using or sort of have a priority queue for the job. I don't think we're using them. I think if I recall, when we want like a release right now, it's usually been like the platform or something. So I think what we need there is a way to, which might just be like a different plugin, is be able to parallelize platform jobs as opposed to making the platform more important than like some other job that's blocking it. Because of how we have things set up, so like the platform builds on a particular set of agents, and then each agent is tied to its like package source origin. Like jobs that use the super old like 1.6.3 don't really compete with resources for the jobs that are using like 15.4.1 as their base image. So I guess that's a long way of saying is that there's not like a feature that's enabled that we aren't using, but there's probably something we can do to fix that or make it be less of a problem in the future. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. Feel free to kind of shoot me more questions, or I've re-volunteered if your particular job isn't working to look at it. And I'm sure since this kind of ties into other build things, we can talk about it at the upcoming Manta meetup as well. Cool. So thanks again.